Oh, today I'm doing a rear brake job on my Kia Sorento, 2014 Kia Sorento. Brenda came home and told me that she heard a grinding noise and was confirmed and verified by myself and the mechanic that recently changed our winter tires over, said it need brakes. Pretty obvious to see if you look inside the wheel here. There's definitely grinding going on, so I've already let it go a little bit too far. But that's fine. It didn't, as long as it didn't damage any of the caliper. That's good. I've already done the other side, the right side. Um, that one I just finished doing, but I figured I'd do a video on this side here and just kind of quickly go over how I do the rear brakes on my 2014 Kia Sorento. So the first thing I'm going to do here is just remove the rear wheel on this side. Now that the rear wheel is off, I'm going to go ahead and break my bleed screw right now. I've already removed the cap, a little rubber cap that goes on there, and I've already popped that off. So now I'm going to break this loose because I'm going to need to push the piston on the caliper back in, and I know I want to be able to have the fluid coming out of here, and it's easier to loosen it up now while it's still connected to the frame here. So I can, because it's sometimes pretty tight if it's been on there for a while. There it goes. And I'm just going to loosen it up, make sure it comes loose. I'll snug it back just a bit until I'm ready to break it free again, but at least now I know it'll come off. It's easier to do here than to try and do it in your hand, so that's why I do it now. Now I'm going to remove the two bolts that hold the caliper on. There's one up here and there's one down underneath, and I'll see if I can't show you that. If not, though, there's two of them. There's, like I said, one here, and I'm going to remove this whole caliper. All right, so there's one bolt right here. Just removing that. I'm using a 1/2 inch with a 14 millimeter socket, and I also use a little piece of a pipe that I had, and this is gas line. I think it's 1 inch, 3/4 inch, sorry, and it just fits nicely over the handle of my ratchet here, so that it gives me a little bit more leverage in a tight spot. It just makes it a little easier to take out. I'm going to go ahead and remove the bottom bolt now. There's the bottom bolt right here. Again, I'm just going to slide this pipe on the end of my ratchet. This gives me a little more leverage. These bolts here, since they're in for so long at a time, they do tend to get rusty and can get in there pretty tight. And once it's loose, that's all I need. Finish taking it out by hand. There we go. Like I said, they're pretty dry and rusty. That's why they can be a little tight, need a little persuasion sometimes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and remove the caliper. Sometimes you need to pry it off a little bit. I just take a screwdriver and wedge it in here between the rotor and the caliper, and just kind of pry it up a little bit. There can be a little lip on here. It can make it be a little hard to come off, but it'll come right off. All right. I'll just set that aside for now. Up here, out of the way. That'll be good enough. Now I'll go ahead and remove this brake disc rotor. To do that, we'll have to remove these two screws right on here. Let's see, make sure I get the camera down here. There's a couple of screws that hold this on, and I'll just remove those. To do that, again, a regular screwdriver may work. Let me try it by hand here. But you can see it just wants to turn. So I have, it's called an impact screwdriver, and basically when you hit the end of this, it will manually turn this tip to loosen the screw. Usually just a couple taps. There you go. There's one. And there's two. And I'll just use this screwdriver bit to take this off. Alright, now that I got those screws out, this rotor may not come off, this brake disc may not come off very easily because it's probably been on there so long, it's a little corroded and rusty. So you're going to have to give it a couple taps with the hammer. You want to be careful not to hit your shield back here behind this shield right here. You don't want to tap on that. You just want to hit this rotor right here that's turning. And usually I'll give it a couple taps, turn it, give it a couple taps, and just keep doing that, and eventually it should break free. And that takes your rotor off, brake disc. Now this particular vehicle, this model, has the park brake on the inside here. Those pads are fine, and they usually don't wear out unless you're riding around with your park brake on. But other than that, everything else looks good. Everything spins freely. So now I will go ahead and start removing the old brake pads, which will require me to remove this bracket right here. And to do that, you just remove these two screws right here, one here and one on this side. Again, 14 millimeter. And I'll use my impact 14 millimeter. Those should come out fairly easy, and they do. Alright, once those are removed, this whole bracket assembly with the pad should remove right out of here, like so. And you'll want to take note of where your pads are. Just to identify, there are two different pads. There's one right here that has this little tab on it, and then the other side does not. So you just want to make note of that, so when you put your new ones in, you do it the same way. So the tab again goes on the side here with where it screws onto the bracket. Alright, to clean this up, I'm just going to lock this in my vise. I've set myself up, my drill, it's just a standard drill, but I've got a wire brush in here, and I'm just going to basically wire brush this all out, clean it up. Alright, so you can see I just wire wheeled this for a little bit, and if you can see, there's still, I'm trying to point to it here, there's still a little bit of surface rust on here. These little spots of surface rust, believe it or not, will cause that clip that goes on here to not sit down enough. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish cleaning this up until I get it right down to like over here, this clear metal right here on the side. This is pretty much what I want it to look like over here. I want to remove all this other stuff the wire brush would not take out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm just going to take a little chisel I have here and just kind of, not trying to remove any metal, I'm just removing the excess rust that the wire wheel wouldn't take off. I want to get it down to as close to clean and original as possible. I don't want any rust behind that clip. It's only going to continue to build up, and over time that pressure will add a little friction and resistance to the brake pads moving, and I don't want them sticking and causing a problem down the road. Now, a lot of people probably wouldn't go through this process. They probably just go get brand new brackets, which is obviously an option. But I've been doing this a little while, so I know this will work fine. There's nothing wrong with the bracket itself, other than being a little bit of rusty. And once I'm done, it'll be as good as new anyway. So, and now you can see it's nice and clean. A little spot here. You can see it down in here. I'll just clean it up. I like to have it as clean as I can. That's pretty good right there. I like that. And now I'll just flip it over and do the other side. Alright, same thing here. You can see it's pretty dirty and rusty. I'm just going to take the wire brush to it, clean up the loose stuff, and then I'll come back and scrape out the rest. Alright, once again, you can see where the wire brush doesn't quite clean up everything. There's a little bit of rust in here, a little bit of built up here, right in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean this up. It may not seem like much, but believe it or not, that little bit of rust and what's going to continue to happen behind this clip once I put it back on is going to make the situation worse if I just leave it. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean that up. Just scrape it off. There you go. So now that's nice and clean. I've got that nice, right down to metal. There's no rust in there. So that clip will sit in there nice and flush. And I don't need to go out and buy a whole new bracket or part of a caliper. Alright, we'll get over back to the car, start putting it back together. Alright, back over here at the car. Got my caliper all cleaned up. I got the bracket here. I should say the bracket. Brake pad bracket's all nice and clean. And again, that's for me, that's important. I like having this surface right down to the metal as much as possible, which means scraping it out, whatever you need to do. So then I'll put these clips on. I want to make sure that clip sits nice in there, nice and flush. Like so. Don't worry about that too much right up here. It'll, once the pad gets in there, that'll hold in place. So there you are with your new clips in place, and they're sitting nice and flush on here. So now I go ahead and put my pads in, and those basically just slip into place. And these pads, you can see there's a little tab on here. That little tab sits right in here, and it be the same on both sides. It can be a little tricky to put them in there, but basically they just push in there and hold in place with the with these clips. So just gonna fuss with it a little bit here. There you go. And I like to push them out as far as they'll go, so it gives me maximum spacing in here for now. and I'll just set this aside. The other thing you want to make sure is that these right here are loose and they should not be too hard to pull. There'll be a little bit of resistance. There's some grease in there, and there's a rubber boot on here. And basically, when you this whole caliper is designed to float, and that's why they should move freely. And you can see when I pull it up, it kind of wants to go back on its own, and that's the way it's designed to work. So as long as these are moving freely up and down, you should be fine. No need to do anything with those. So the next thing I want to do is, because my piston is pushed out so far with the old pads, I need to push this back in, and that's where where I broke the bleed screw loose a while ago. When I loosened up the bleed screw, I'm going to open that up, and then I'm going to take my clamp. I have a special tool for compressing this, but I couldn't find it, so I'm going to improvise, basically just using a clamp here. And I'm going to take one of the old brake pads that I have, and I'm going to, you can see this where I'm working, I'm going to just put this brake pad in here, give me a nice flush surface to press on, because this caliper, the piston obviously, it's got a hole in it, and my clamp here, I have, like I said, a special tool, I just can't find it right now, but this is just going to go in the hole. I don't want that. I want a nice even pressure so that when I'm pushing this back in, this piston, it's going in nice and square, nice and straight. So that's why I'm going to use this brake pad, this old brake pad. I'm just going to put that in there for now, and I'll use my clamp, open it up a little bit, and just kind of snug that down. And then I'm going to take a rag, and you can obviously just run a hose also. If you have a little hose, you can put on your bleeder screw here and run it into a jar. I'm not going to get that much fluid out of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and use a rag for now. Loosen up my bleed screw that I previously loosened, and now that it's already loosened, it makes it a little easier to do. So get ready to tighten that back up, and I'm just going to start turning this, and you can see the brake fluid coming out of there, and basically what that's doing is just pushing that piston back in. And, may have to come back and bleed it again when I'm done, but for now I just want to get that piston in as much as possible so that I'm not fighting to put the caliper back on the new disc. There we go. I'll just tighten this bleed screw back up. Okay, bleed screw is tight, and I've pushed the piston back into the caliper. I can go ahead and release that now. I'll leave that like that for a moment while I'm going to go ahead and put this on, the new one on. And before I install the new rotor, I like to wipe it down. They come, when they're shipped, with coating on them, a little bit of oil, whatnot, just to prevent them from rusting. So I just take a little bit of brake clean, and it's raining out here right now. We're getting a little bit of a mist, that's why it looks wet, but basically I'm just going to spray this down to get off the excess shipping grease and whatnot. And I'm going to want to do both sides and the inside where the park brake pads ride. One last thing I want to do on the old rotor here, there's a site inspection plug. It's a rubber plug, and you can just push that out. It pops right out, and you're going to want to put that one on your new rotor. That's the inspection hole for your park brake pads. That way you don't have to take everything apart. Just pop that out and you can take a peek inside. I'm going to set the old rotor aside here. All right. So you just want to make sure you line up the 2 screw holes that hold your rotor onto the brake hub here, the axle hub I should say. You got 1 hole that's above this stud and 1 hole that's above this stud, and once those 2 holes are lined up, you can go ahead and screw that on. I like to use a little bit of anti-seize lubrication. Doesn't take much, but it'll help on the disassembly next time if it has to come back apart some point down the road. I'll go ahead and put the second one on. Again, doesn't take a whole lot. You just want to lightly coat it so that you get a little bit on there. All right, and I'm going to take my impact screwdriver here. Just kind of get this snugged up real quick before I tighten it up. All right. And this does not need to be impacted on, but it makes it easier because the rotor wants to turn on you. So I just give it a little tap with the hammer. Kind of awkward position here. But there you go. Okay. New rotor's on. Everything spins freely, no rubbing on anything. That's all good. I'm ready to go ahead and put the caliper back on. I'm going to take my clamp off of here. And first thing I got to do is reassemble the bracket for the brakes. And that'll go on like this. Okay, now that I've got that tightened up, I'm ready to mount this brake caliper back on here. Again, I'm just going to apply a little bit of anti-seize to these 2 bolts here. Just line everything up. Alright, once you get the caliper and bracket bolts tight, just make sure it spins freely without any excess rubbing anywhere. Remount your tire, check your brake fluid level. You may need to bleed the brakes. That's going to require another person probably to help you do that. That's another video. But for now, I'm ready to give this, I'm going to put the wheel back on, just give this a test drive, check the brakes out, and then if it needs bleeding, I'll come back and do that.